lecture today is called White Buddhism. In fact, Buddhism is so white that if you don't have your cotton drawers and overcoat on, you gonna freeze to death because Buddhism is so white, you think you in Antarctica. Let's go in and tell you about this white Buddhism. On Sunday, I spoke with the SGI member. Oh, I can't think of what her name was. I spoke to the SGI member. This woman has been practicing SGI Buddhism since 1976. And this African American woman does not even have a clue about Buddhism. Not only her, but you got many people that's practicing Buddhism, and what you have in the Buddhist religion among many of the African Americans, you have people who are a blind stooge and willfully ignorant. When I spoke to the woman, she says, I just don't want to make no trouble. I just want to chant and be happy. This woman has no clue about the Buddhist teachings. Now today, we are going to tell you about white Buddhism, because the Buddhism of Nichiren teachings and the way that this Buddhism is taught, it is taught to be white Buddhism. The Japanese purposefully and maliciously extricated all of the black history from Buddhism, and they created what I am describing today as white Buddhism. So if you practice Buddhism with the SGI, Nichiren Shoshu, and Nichiren Shu, then you are practicing not Buddhism, but you are practicing white Buddhism, because they teach white Buddhism. And let me get one thing straight. I am a proud black Buddhist, and I do not give a damn about white Buddhism. I believe in Buddhism. I believe in equality, and I believe in justice, and I believe in true Buddhism. And the Buddhism that they land down is white Buddhism, and it ain't true Buddhism. In 2015, in our modern technological society, you have people who are just quite ignorant. Now, let me explain one thing to you. From the Hindu Buddhism, or from white Buddhist teachings, came Nazism, the Aryan nation, and the concept of white superiority. This comes from the Buddhist teachings. This comes from Hindu Buddhism. I do not believe in no Hitler. I do not believe in no Aryan nation, and I don't believe in white superiority, and I don't believe in white Buddhism. Let's get into it. In 2013, out-of-hearted Nichiren Shoshu, because of their racist policies, in 1991, I departed the SGI because of their racist policies. And in 2013, I tried to join the Nichiren Shu Buddhist sect, hoping that these people were fair, equitable, and they would teach a true Buddhism, since my friend Chaka had joined Nichiren Shu, and there was an African-American priest by the name of Muke Shonen. But later I come to find out that Muke Shonen is about as black and ethnically sensitive as Clarence Thomas, an African-American man who is on the Supreme Court. You got about as much chance of McKay Shonen speaking out for black equality or the equality of black people than you have Clarence Thomas speaking out for civil rights or freedom, justice, and equality. In fact, when I was to try to join the Nichiren Shu organization, I got with my friend Shaka and said, let's call this the Memphis Proud Black Buddhists. And boy, when Bouquet Shonen heard that this going to be some proud black Buddhists, she would have stopped at that right quick. She said, boy, we can't get no white people upset. This woman was an agent for the white people. She cut her hair off. She's half Japanese. Her mama Japanese, her daddy African American, and she works for Nichiren Shoshu, and she was not about to break up or bring forward the idea of the racism in Buddhism. Her job is to help perpetuate white Buddhism. Let's get into it. Let's start off with Nichiren Shoshu. Now, I want you to see a picture. Now, this picture is of a white American Nichiren Shoshu priest named Reverend Roy Michael McCormick. Now, when you look at Reverend Roy Michael McCormick, you see a young white man, educated, scholarly. I mean, this white man laid down some bad stuff. In fact, I would just glancingly read the stuff by Reverend Roy McCormick, and I says, boy, I like this guy. Now, when you investigate and you study what Reverend Michael McCormick espoused, I said, oh my goodness. This white boy is an agent that teaches white racist Buddhism. I could not believe it. Here you got Japanese that are racist, and what did they do? They put a white boy, an intelligent young white man who was scholarly, and they got this white boy to espouse racist doctrine. Now, what I want you to do, I want you to look on his website. Reverend Roy McCormick is just as racist as Joe Sixpack in America. On his website, this is what he writes. And he's talking about the Vedic culture. He writes this. He says, quote, the Vedic cosmology is a mystic view of the world based on the liturgical hymns known as the Vedas. The Vedas were brought into India by the Aryans, or noble ones. Indo-Europeans who migrated into northwestern India from southern Russia, northern Iran, during the second millennium BCE, the Vedas were divine revelations of the religions of the Brahmins, the Aryan priestly caste, and their religion came to be called Brahmanism, named after the priest, but not after the priest, but after the divine itself, which they call Brahman. Brahmanism would eventually evolve into the very diverse traditions, which is now referred to as Hinduism. Now, here this white boy talking about some diverse traditions. When you study the history of Hinduism, what you get is that you get a racist culture. This is the first time in the history of the world that racism evolved and it came from the Brahmins, and this white boy talk about some divine tradition. It's like a Christian slave owner saying Christians are nice people because they're nice Christian slave owners. This man is promoting racism. Now listen, ladies and gentlemen. You got a young white man who is supposed to be a scholar, who is highly educated, but yet he come up with some nonsense talking about some Vedic cosmology. There was no such thing as no Vedic cosmology. The premise that Reverend Ruler comic that Nichiren Shu priest begins with is fraud. Certainly the end is fraud. Vedic cosmology is a buzzword for white supremacy. Adolf Hitler and the Germans brought into practice the lie of the Vedic cosmology, and this is where Nazi Germany and white supremacy in the Aryan theory of India comes from. It comes from the Rig Veda. This white boy is promoting racism dead smack in the middle of Buddhism. Science proves the Vedas in the Rig Veda as a false document. There was never an Indo-European invasion in India by Aryans. The idea came from the German Orientalist by the name of Max Muller. It was Max Muller, a German who got educated in India, who learned Sanskrit, and he bought into the story of the Rig Veda, and he told other white people that the ancestors to the people in power, the Aryans, were the ancestors, and it proves white superiority. He then took his doctrines of white superiority, and Hitler adopted the swastika, the idea of the Rig Veda, and this notion of white superiority came up. That's where Hitler got this mess from, and you got a guy like Reverend Michael McCormick talking about some Vedas when science proves that an Aryan invasion has never happened. There is no archaeological, anthropological, or literary evidence of there ever being an Aryan invasion. In fact, science proves that the Rig Veda was a false document, and it was Max Muller who put the date of the Aryan invasion as 1500 BC. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you really want to know the history and you want to know facts, one of the greatest civilizations in the world was the Indus Valley Civilization, and the Indus Valley Civilization was that of black people. In India, there were people of African descent. There were Negroid people, and the religion of Buddhism was brought about, was based upon those people. Now, when we look at India today, you do not see the Negroid people, or you don't see the Buddhist people, because they were killed. Just like when you come to America today. America today was not the America that it was 250 years ago when the Native Americans was here. They were all killed. The black people got killed. Now, you got this guy, Reverend Michael McCormick, that's teaching and espousing a fraud like the Rig Veda. The entire teachings of the Vedic cosmology that Reverend Michael McCormick teach is based on fraud. Science proves the Aryan Invasion theory of India a fraud, unscientific. Archaeology, anthropology, literary science, and science proves the Rig Veda as a fraud and unscientific. This white boy, Reverend McCormick, is a young white Buddhist scholar who is teaching racism and fraud. Now, Mukesh Shonen is half black. And you would expect her to have some integrity, even though if you put the facts into her and you tell her the facts of history, there was never an Aryan invasion, she is not going to stand up to what is truth. It was Dr. Martin Luther King who stood up, and others who stood up and made America live up to its creeds of freedom, justice, and equality. And we still have racism in America. We had it then, and we got it now. That's why we got examples of Ferguson, Missouri, where a black man can get killed in the street, and a white police officer can get off, or they can kill and brutalize people, or you see the Justice Department of the United States of America seeing justice departments or police departments all over America pimping poor black people by giving them unnecessary fines, arresting people, and they pimping poor people just to keep their municipalities going and open. They're pimping, they're racist, just like Michael McCormick, who knows better. But please understand, Michael McCormick, Nichiren Shu is the Nichiren sect that founded Risho University in 1580. This is the first university in Japan, and it was founded by Nichiren Shu. And Reverend Mike McCormick gets his stuff from Nichiren Shu. This tells you that not only do you have racism, you got institutional racism, because it is the racists at Risho University that taught him this mess, that taught all these Nichiren Shu priests this mess. They are the ones that espouse white Buddhism, because they took it upon themselves to extricate all of the black history and culture from Buddhism. Now, they have a university called the Risho University. It is based on the Risho and Kunkaran, which means on establishing the correct teachings for the peace of the land. How could you have a teaching established for the peace of the land when you got fraud, when you are telling a lie, and then yet you are teaching this lie, you're teaching this fraud, you are teaching white Buddhism? Nichiren says in the Ghost Show, The Roots of Good Fortune, he says, quote, to illustrate, if one plants good seed in a bad field, that seed itself will be ruined, and one will suffer loss. Even if one is sincere, if the person to whom one makes offerings is evil, those offerings will fail to produce benefit. Rather, they will cause one to fall into evil paths. Now, when you got Daisaki Keita, Nichiren Shoshu, and Nichiren Shu teaching racism, that is like planting a bad seed and a good seed in a bad field. Nothing is going to come out of it. And the reason Buddhism is not growing in America or not growing in the world, because it is based on racism. But it's not just Nichiren Shu. The Vedic nonsense taught by Nichiren Shu is racist and fraud. There was never an Aryan invasion in India. The Vedic nonsense is racism. In Nichiren Shoshu, they talk about the history of Buddhism in their magazine called the Davi Yako 358. This is the Nichiren Shoshu set, ladies and gentlemen. They said in about 2500 BC, a race known as Dravidians was well established. Well, we know Dravidians are the black people. In addition to Indus civilization, the people spoke multiple languages, and there were many ethnic groups, and da-da-da-da-da. And they said, quote, 500 BC, the Aryans penetrated the Punjab region in the upper Indus Valley after subjugating the Aborigines. They created class distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, there was never an Aryan invasion of India. During the time of the Buddha, black people were in power. Now you had some Aryans, but they was not in power. They did not get into power until 1,000 years after the Buddha. After Shakyamuni died, King Ashoka of the Myrmidons, first of all, the first people, ladies and gentlemen, after the Buddha died, Alexander the Great tried to come in there, a white man tried to come in India. He went up against the Naka Empire that was black. And then after the Nadas turned Alexander around, it was the Miriam dynasty who conquered the Nadas and the Mirians, and the grandson of the Miriam, Chakrapucha Gandha, Chakrapucha's grandson, was King Asoka, that sent Buddhism all over the world, and that was Buddhism in Africa 1,000 years before it ever got to Japan. And there was no such thing as Sanskrit 500 years, over 500 years after the Buddha's death, because Sanskrit didn't come about until the Gupta era. And when Sanskrit came about, Hindu Buddhism came about, and what the Hindus did was incorporated the Buddha into the Hindu pantheon, and they turned the Buddha from black to white. And what Nichiren Shoshu, Nichiren Shu, they all teach Hindu Buddhism, or they all teach what we call white Buddhism. Now, let's go into Daisaku Ikeda. In, I think, a book about 1976, Daisaku Ikeda wrote a fictionalized book. It wasn't even no real story. He wrote a fictionalized book called The Living Buddha, and this is what Daisaku Ikeda says. He says, quote, "Finally, I do not think that it is possible to determine for certain the racial origin of Shakyamuni." Well, that's a lie. Who lived many centuries ago. It cannot be denied, however, that in the ways of thinking associated with Buddhism, there are characteristics that strongly suggest some connection with Indo-Aryan people and their culture. Whatever the racial origin of its founder, there is no doubt that Buddhism grew up within the Indo-Aryan cultural spirit. Now this is what Daisaku Ikeda is saying. How could the Buddha grow up in an Indo-Aryan spirit when there was never Indo-Aryans in India? It never happened. They weren't there. So how can it be possible? Daisaku Ikeda is full of a bunch of jive. All of them are full of jive because there is no scientific evidence. There is no archaeological evidence of one single white phenotype that they ever found in the Harrapon civilization, because the Harrapon civilization was a black civilization in India, and the Indus Valley was the Harrappans. And they never found no chariot, no horses, all the stuff that the Rig Veda talk about. Scientists have dispelled that as fraud. What white and Japanese people do is that they do not tell you about Black Buddhist history. Now, let me lay it on you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me lay it on you, because while they are racist, Nichiren Shonin was not racist. In the Gosho called the 3 Tai Pitaka priests pray for rain. In that Gosho, this is what Nichiren says. Nichiren says this. There was never an Aryan invasion, but this is what Nichiren says. He says, quote, "These non-Buddhist teachings came about through mistaken readings of various sutras of the Buddhas who preceded Shakyamuni Buddha." Now, what the white people and what the Japanese people do not tell you is that archaeological evidence proves that there was once a black civilization that controlled the world. They were Black Buddhists, and they found statues of Buddhas before Shakyamuni Buddha. There were Buddhas that were thousands of years before Shakyamuni, and they all were black. In the book, The Aneclipses, that was written in 1833 by the British historian Godfrey Higgins, tell about the ancient black nation, and he shows that there are archaeological evidence of the Buddha statues. In the book by Gerald Massey talks about that. British historian Gerald Massey talks about it. White people and scholars know about the Black Buddha. They all just conspire to teach white Buddhism. They don't tell you anything about the black kingdoms. They only tell you about Sanskrit and white Buddhism. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you go to your SGI, your Nichiren Shu, your Nichiren Shoshu meetings, you are learning white Buddhism. And when you see those African Americans that's in the leadership position, you can be sure that what you have among the African Americans, you have blind stooges and people who are willfully ignorant, who are willing to propagate fraud and racism to keep up white Buddhism. We are the proud Black Buddhists, and we are the best suited. I'm Anthony F. Elmore. Have a good day.
Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. All ancient icons show a simple fact. They all show that the Buddha was black. I believe in facts indicator was wrong. Buddha was no Aryan. This song saw the history by those who rewrite history. Brothers and sisters, there's something to understand. It was 1,000 years after Buddha's death, his teaching right in Japan. Let me tell you something that makes sense. The Buddha's teachings did not start in the Orient. Those of you make a religious decision, the Buddha's teaching no ancient religion. The Buddhist religion has a lot of mystery. Ancients took out all the Black Buddhist history. Let me lay on you the history and the facts. Look at the ancient Buddhist statues, is always black. Let me lay this on you, all the Black Buddhist history, and take out all the Buddhist mystery. The land today they call India. In the old days, it was called Eastern Ethiopia. The first people in the land were called Dravidian. The same people today we call Nubian. India is the land where we find the birth of racism. It all started in a religion called Brahmanism.